Welcome, everybody. Here we are again with another episode of Long-Term Athletic Development Chat, or LTAD Chat. Happy again to be joined in this episode with Tony Moreno and Rick Howard, who have been on other episodes as guests and also as host. And they continue to definitely push forward with translating, disseminating, and implementation of long-term athletic development. Guys, welcome to LTAD Chat.
Thanks, Joe. Good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, for listeners, this is where we really share conversations about developing and implementation of best practices in youth and adolescent physical activity, sports training, youth sports, and more. And what we want to do today in this episode is really just, again, share a conversation about long-term athletic development. And the three of us have been on this journey together, and we began this collaboration probably about 3 or so years ago now. But we've all been on this journey a little bit longer than that as well, even before it was called long-term athletic development. And again, we're going to take some time to provide an update in terms of where we are, especially as we near the end of 2020. Kind of talk about what is the state of long-term athletic development at this point in time. And guys, before we really get rolling into some of these questions that we want to take a deeper dive on and be really specific about where we are, let's just get at this question that seems to keep being asked. Very commonly asked question, at least I get this question quite a bit, like, what is long-term athletic development?
Tony, you want to take that one?
Well, like many things that we see out there in the realm of physical activity and exercise and sport, it has many different interpretations. So when I hear the word long-term athletic development, and we can dissect that many ways, but it's a process. It's not a microwave, it's a crock pot, if you will, of creating a framework that's developmentally appropriate and uses best practice peer review science so that we can enable youth to be able to acquire movement and skill and use it in a sport or play or recreational manner and participate throughout the lifespan. I guess that's the easiest way I can kind of describe it. And within that, there are many sub-disciplines that all of us as professionals and practitioners have been engaged in some capacity. Of course, there are those associated with motor development, growth, maturation, exercise science, whether it be physiological or biomechanical. It integrates many different disciplines that we see in sport and physical activity. But the outcome is always the same. What we want is this holistic product, this holistic individual that enjoys participating in physical activity, sport and recreation throughout the lifespan. And so what LTAD is it's a framework that enables this process.
Tony, that sounds really academic. What's, like for practitioners, and again, sometimes there's this criticism of it, right? Like, oh, he's talking about a framework, he's talking about a model, he's talking about the disciplines, like it's very academic, and I'm a practitioner. Like, I'm a practitioner, and I've read a little bit about long-term athletic development. This makes a lot of sense to me, but how can I do it better? Or what else do I need to know about it to really implement it and do it? I want to be able to do this in my community, do this in my school.
Well, before we get to implementation, let's go back to the point that you made, that maybe it sounds a little academic, but here's what we know is that we don't learn calculus until we've mastered subtraction and addition and multiplication and division, and movement is no different. There are very complex movements and skills that are associated with many different sports and physical activities, but the essence of LTAD, as I said earlier, it's developmentally, both emotionally and behaviorally and physically appropriate for children to go through this process of acquiring movement and movement patterns so they can participate in any physical activity or sport or recreation that they enjoy. And so it's simple, in structure and conceptual, in terms of conceptualizing the idea, but oftentimes what we have to do, and we'll get into this, is that we have to provide those opportunities where we can implement it in all types of settings, all types of venues, with all different types of groups, whether it be in the school setting, community, or recreation. So before we get to implementation, let's talk about, it's not a complex process, although it involves science, and we shouldn't be intimidated by science. We should embrace it, but at the same time, break it down so that all of us can use it in an appropriate way.
Rick Howard.
Yeah, hi, everybody. It's great to be with you guys and have this conversation again, because it's near and dear to all of our hearts, and we love talking about it. And I've been trying to think about this more simplistically as we've been going through all this. And I'm looking at LTAD now more as a call to action, that it's a way to bridge the gap to create an answer for coaches, for parents, for athletes themselves, administrators. How do we do it better? We have not been doing it correctly. And LTAD really kind of came out when you think back about it, to find out we know what we're doing isn't working, but we don't know what to do. We know this isn't working right. We need something that's better than this. So what Tony said, as it being a framework to move in that direction, that's completely correct. The framework might look different in different populations, might look different in physical education than it would look out on the sports field, might look different from a coach's perspective, but there's that commonality that Tony mentioned too, the overall health and well-being of everybody involved from cradle to grave. How do you put that together so that it's not just so centric on one particular aspect of it? It became that winning was everything. And now all of a sudden everybody talks about US sports being a $19 billion industry. Well, that doesn't mean that youth coaches are being paid millions of dollars a year. That really is affecting the tourism industry, because now they're getting called to be on One Sport and Travel all over these places. So we've gotten away from the original intent of what we were trying to do. So I look at LTAD now as an answer. It helps us to refocus what we haven't been doing correctly and how to move in that right direction. We have the conversations all the time, however, that unfortunately some people are caught up in the current direction and they can't change their mind. And if we try to change the tide too quickly, we'll cause a tsunami. So we need to figure out, how do we slowly get people on board and show them exactly why LTAD is a better solution to what we're trying to do.
Yeah, let me ask you guys this question, because this comes up as well. Pathways. What about the difference between a participation pathway and a performance pathway?
Well, everybody should be a participant, everybody. And depending upon their environment, many things are influenced by our environment. And these are things that many of us have no control over. But ultimately, we would expect some of those participants to be pushed or interested or embrace or follow a performance pathway. But at the end of the day, we look at LTAD and the American version, the American Development Model. Its essence is all about participation first and foremost. That should be our mission, to increase awareness of the framework so that everybody can become a participant, whether you're in school with physical education, whether you're in a community recreation youth sport program, whether you're in a private youth sport club, whatever it might be. The goal here is to make everybody a participant. And from there, what evolves from that is the performance model. And in the United States, the performance model is unique in comparison to what we find in other parts of the world in terms of how it's subsidized, supported, and marketed. And we shouldn't, one of the things that we have to be careful is not to be critical of the youth sport industry. It's a product of our culture, our American culture. What we should be more critical of is the fact that we don't create opportunities for the vast majority of children to have the opportunity to participate in some type of physical activity or sport in schools and communities. That's what we should be more vocal about. And that's kind of the, where we need to really move the conversation, getting it in the hands of those people who work with youth in those settings at the grassroots level.
I'll add to that a little bit too. I think that our pathway model is another adult concept. Kids would definitely not say that. We all grew up without a performance pathway. We all played. We all went out and did what we needed to do. And wow, holy cow, kids still went to play college and went to play college sports. They still made the pros. But there wasn't this focused process. Like Tony said, our culture has completely changed. So we think we need to develop a performance pathway, almost the same way that we think epidemiologically, we need to look backwards and say, gosh, we really need to protect third graders' low back health and worry about their cardiorespiratory fitness, because we need to make sure that nothing happens to them when they're older. We don't let them be kids. So we've kind of gotten away from that. From every angle we look at it, we've imposed this adult model on kids, whether it's for physical activity, physical education, or sports, because we think that that's what's going to be best for them. But the evidence is showing exactly the opposite. Why don't we just let them play? Why do we need a performance pathway? If you look at what Tony was talking about too with ADM, if you're going to have everybody just have this balance of play as the base of your pyramid up to age 12, then Joe, you've said it all the time, it's sport agnostic. It's really, how are you developing those skills that you can be active for a lifetime, and then choose your pathway if you want to go down a performance pathway. Not to say you're 8 years old and you better sign up for my X sport program now, next month, the rest of the year, and for the rest of your monetary life. And that's really what it is. And Tony's right there too. We're a culture that's what we focus on. We monetize things, and we're just that way to try to figure out how do we make money off of that. And they figured out a great way to do it. I think COVID right now is an outstanding opportunity for us to really rethink all of this, because it's very evident. COVID didn't cause this crisis in youth sports, but it's exacerbated it. It's shown us what is really wrong and what we really can fix. The problem is, when I was in Philadelphia, we used to refer to this as the old shoe. We know it's beat up. We know it's worn out. It doesn't fit right. It's out of style, whatever it is, but we wear it anyway because it's our old shoe. We do the same thing with youth sports and everything else now. We just want to get back and put our old shoes on and let life be the way that we think life should be. But we need new shoes. So we really need to work together, I think, to try to create what has to happen. And LTAD, like we started this conversation off, is a great framework. It's a great reference point to start to create the action we need to actually turn this around.
Yeah, let's move on to some advances. And you guys have been attending a lot of different meetings virtually with a lot of different groups. Maybe we can call that the top-down part of the movement. What do you think are some of the big advances that have been made in long-term athletic development in the last several years?
Well, in the United States, it's just great to see the word in conversation and in initiatives. The Shape America released the national standards for sport coaches, and the LTAD ADM language is in that document. And it's a very important document as it relates to coach education and coach educators, using best practice peer review models for coaching education at all levels, from youth all the way up to the professional ranks. So it was good to see the framework mentioned in that document. I believe I've also seen it mentioned in the Department of Health and Human Services National Youth Sports Strategy document. What's great about these things, and of course the USOPC ADM model, what's great about these things is these are things that are at a national level and a national scope. And it would be great to see these things trickle down. I've been involved with you guys with our LTAD playgrounds, and the opportunity that we had with the NSCA to host an LTAD pre-conference. I think these types of events are helping to push the framework and the concept out there, but we definitely need to do more, especially at the grassroots level. So I think in the past 3 years, I think it's good to see that word in the vernacular of sport coaches and performance coaches, and hopefully get it into the hands of physical educators and community recreation leaders. I think that's what we really need to do now that it's there, right? We know it's there. We need to do a better job of getting it into the hands of people who can use it.
Yeah, Tony, we'll return to that when we talk about some, possible solutions as well, but I'm glad that you brought that up. Rick, what do you see as some advances in the last few years?
Joe, I'm just thinking about while Tony's talking, what you said earlier about, his original definition of LTAD was very academic. What does a coach think of this? And I think that's a huge point here. And I think some of the advances that we've had is that we recognize that there are two different languages, two different silos, as it were. In fact, it's all silos. But what we're finding is that each silo is talking about LTAD, so that's good. So I think one of the biggest advances we've seen in the past several years is that all of the silos recognize that there is this term LTAD and that they can use it to their benefit to help kids to become active movers across the lifespan. How they choose to do it is somewhat different. They don't reach out of their silo to get others to talk about it. We can talk more about that later too. But I think the key thing that's happened now is that LTAD has legs. So Tony mentioned NSCA, and I think that when we created the position statement on LTAD, it just wasn't a position statement where the authors patted one another on the back, had a beer, and went home. We said, let's give it legs. Let's actually make this an actionable thing. Let's create articles. Let's create a movement around LTAD to get it out into the community. And NSCA was completely supportive of that idea, that rather than just create a position statement so that people know where you stand on a particular issue, that we said, let's get it out so that people could see what it is, to try to bridge that gap between the top down and the bottom up. So I think that the awareness that there needs to be a bridging of the gap between top down, bottom up, and then all of the organizations that are involved there, I think that's been huge. And it's led us to where we are now, that we can really create a movement and a momentum leading into 2021.
Yeah, do you guys care to give any specifics about some of the meetings and groups that you've been involved with in the last year, and maybe where those groups are and where they're going?
I'll defer to Rick on this one to fire.
Gosh, I had it all set up perfectly so that you would always answer
first. He's an involved guy.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, we can start with the NSCA, and I think that's probably a great place to start. But we've had some involvement. Tony and I have had an opportunity on behalf of the NSCA to be part of the Joint Commission on Sports Medicine and Science, which is kind of a loosely held group of like-minded organizations that serve the sports medicine and science communities. So it includes a lot of the groups that we've talked about already, include Shape America, USOPC, ACSM, NATA. We go on all the acronyms and language here, but we could say that it involves groups who are involved in physical education and in physical activity and in sports medicine and in the scientific realm, to start to have some of these conversations. So we've been able to talk to different groups to be able to say, what can we do to move forward together so the conversations continue? We initially had a conversation around the idea of collective impact, so that we could actually have a shared vision, that we could say, all right, here's what we need for tomorrow, and here's how each of us brings expertise into this situation to help move that forward. So I think those who are interested in that whole idea have continued that conversation. It doesn't include everybody, but I think that's starting to build a little bit momentum too, because we look at it from a couple of different areas. Youth sports is certainly one of those key areas, but I think we recognize, if we're looking at the health and well-being of the whole child, that that's not all. So we also have to look at the physical, the mental, social, emotional health of all kids and all adults for that matter. How does that factor in? We're talking about making a consortium, a public consortium for Healthy People 2030, to be able to move that forward, to say, you know what, I posted about it the other day, because I always joked about this when I taught my classes. When Healthy People 2000 came around, I'm teaching my students, they're all kind of looking at me, I'm like, what? They have no idea what it is. So there's so many things that are out there that are necessary, but nobody knew what Healthy People 2000 was, or 2010, or 2020. And 2030 was just announced in October, but nobody knows about that either. So how do we reach national health objectives if nobody even knows that we have them to reach? So I think the conversation has gotten so much better that LTAD is now part of this bigger movement. I think part of the issue initially is because it had the word athlete in it, that so many people said, well, it's only for the elite athletes, so we don't need to talk about that. But they really see that there is a place for LTAD within our conversation of health literacy, physical literacy, and all of the other objectives that we talk to on a national and an international scale moving forward. And I think that's a huge win for everybody to recognize that LTAD is a key piece of everything that we can do as a start.
I can't say it any better than Rick just kind of laid it out. I mean, we have national initiatives. We have many initiatives. Some of these are government initiatives, such as the National Youth Sports Strategy. We have initiatives that are from various organizations that are working together as a coalition, such as Healthy People 2030, the National Physical Activity Plan. We have private organizations, such as that Project Play is an example that uses corporate sponsorship and support to push their initiatives, the 8 Plays. So there are all of these initiatives, but most people don't even know that they exist or are aware of them. I mean, go out and ask any physical educator if they know what the National Physical Activity Plan is or what Healthy People 2030 is. Yet physical education as a discipline is so critical to the success of both of those initiatives, but people aren't talking to each other. And I think, and you're a part of this, Joe, and obviously Rick and I have been on some conversations, but you've been a part of this as well, Joe. And, at the end of the day, it's really about us working together to get people to come to the table together. As Rick always says, get all the oars of the boat moving in the same direction so that we can make change as a coalition or as a collective rather than our own separate silos. And I've been adamant about a quote unquote national repository of information as it relates to youth sport and physical activity, because we know that every organization, every initiative has its own silo of information and wants to be the holder of that information and be the one that promotes it through their organization. We understand that, but what would really help drive these initiatives to succeed, because we need them to succeed, is if we all come together and share this information in one place so that my youth sport coaches, as a part of my youth lacrosse, they can get access to that information and use it Monday morning or Monday afternoon or whatever it might be, or that community recreation leader that wants to start a sport agnostic program, or a high school coach who maybe is interested in various forms of resistance training. People have to have that information at their disposal in order to be able to use it. And when we talk about collective impact, collectively, we can make this happen. And I think we're at that critical stage, as Rick just said, we're at this critical point right now where we really need to push this over the edge.
There've been a few times when I think challenges have already been mentioned, maybe indirectly in this conversation. This is somewhat like a SWOT analysis, isn't it? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges and threats right now. You mentioned some advances, and a lot of it is at more so, I'd say, at the national level, with awareness, some groups working together. Countless times you guys have talked about white papers, position papers, maybe putting all that information in a repository, Tony. And just for the listeners, we'll make sure to have links to all of those key organizations that have been mentioned here. But how about some of the challenges and threats? What other challenges and threats are out there that may not have been mentioned, or maybe that you just want to be really clear that we still have these challenges and threats in front of us, despite some of the advances? And after that, we'll get into some solutions. So if you can hold the solutions, let's just kind of identify threats and challenges.
All right, well, I could identify some challenges for us. The first one is the status quo. Everybody likes to just maintain what's going on. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, I think we're seeing that it really is broke and it does need fixing. But I think there are a lot of people out there who really think that this is working, that, their child is going to be the next phenoms. So we better get him or her started at age 6, if not sooner, on that pathway to success. So yeah, I think that continues to be a struggle, that there still exists that mindset that that is the way to go. And that only by joining a top-notch program from early on to foster that growth and development is that going to happen, not through natural play and not through recreational programs, school-based programs. Tony mentioned it before, getting more kids involved. My tagline has always been fill the talent pool. And by that, I've always meant that we need to give every kid every opportunity that he or she can have to be the best that they can be, not just try to weed out the early matures at age 6, 7, and 8, and then have them go down the pathway until they burn out and then try to figure out what to do next. So I think that is a key issue. I think, as we've talked about so many times, the word athlete, we kind of alluded to that a little bit different, where, participant, like, what do you call it? So using the term athlete, for some people, they don't recognize that everybody's an athlete. They think that if you say the word athlete, you're only talking about an elite performer, not just that everybody who's trying to do the best they can to be physically active in whatever activity they choose to participate. So I think that continues to be a challenge. There are some groups that don't share in the sandbox. They kind of want all the credit, I think, for everything that comes down the pike. So if we're going to put something together, unless we're doing it underneath their brand or underneath their name, they're not willing to partner and play together with other organizations for the good of kids. So I think that continues to be an issue. We talked about a little earlier too. There are some groups that we don't really think get what we're talking about with LTAD based on their particular vision and philosophy within their own organization. They kind of see things a little bit differently in terms of what kids should be doing. Having things such as benchmarks for different grades and ages doesn't necessarily work, as we know, and to hold kids to that standard doesn't do the best for that child either. So that continues to be a problem. COVID is a huge challenge, I think, right now, because we're finding that kids are finding a lot of other things to do besides sports. So there's a lot of conversation that when we do go back, a lot of kids are not going to go back to play sports. They're going to continue to play the video games that they've become very comfortable with while sitting at home waiting to go back outside. So I think physical activity is not valued in our society, which is another huge problem that we have. When COVID came out, you saw people go out in the streets for about a week or so and then not. So I noticed a really, quick drop off after the excitement wore off. Hey, we're all outside having a good time. They're like, yeah, okay, let's go back in now. So we didn't continue that process. We didn't own it. We didn't cherish that and value that. And I think unless we as a society, and Tony mentioned this before, whatever our societal values are, we're going to see that in all of our processes and products, unless we're really focusing on how we turn that tide. And, COVID's really brought to our attention that the better we take care of our physical, emotional health, the better off we're going to be. But there hasn't been a national push for everybody to get out and be active, to lose weight, eat better. It's just been, wait around for the vaccine and we'll hope for the best. So we really need to turn that tide, I think, in our society, how important that is. We should be setting the stage now for how we're going to improve physical activity in schools and get kids to be more active throughout the whole school day. I'm watching my grandkids in school right now. They're 8 and 10 years old. They are on the computer from 8:30 in the morning until 3:15 in the afternoon. They get 20 minutes for lunch, and then every 3 days they get specials. So maybe they get phys ed. And what the phys ed class is doing? Group exercise. Jumping jacks for a minute, ready, go. They're not learning. They're not doing anything, So there's been this downward trend of what kids are actually going to be able to hold on to when all of this is over. And it's just a perfect time to make a great change, but there are not enough organizations willing to work together right now to make that happen. So I think we're going to have to push the envelope a little.
Yeah, just going to follow up with what Rick says, and I'll address the threat first because I don't have to get into it. But the threat is like Rick says, it's the status quo. We're very comfortable wearing the old shoes that he brought up earlier. That's the biggest threat. But to me, the challenge is one of leadership. We don't have any leadership right now in this space. We don't have a physical activity czar, or we don't have a General Eisenhower. We don't have a General Schwarzkopf. We don't have anybody that is rallying us to make sure everybody is getting the same message. Everybody is doing whatever they want in this space right now. And if we really want to change our culture as it relates to physical activity, we all have to get on the same page, because everything that we've done from the past 30, 40, 50 years quite simply is not working. And at present, pre-COVID, we're a disaster. Pre-COVID, we're a disaster. And as Rick alluded to, COVID just kind of exposed all those things that we didn't do very well. And a lot of people have their hands in their pockets. The basement is the backyard of the 21st century. That's where most kids are right now. And I live in Michigan, and it's particularly bad because now you have to fight weather. You know, who wants to go out and play by themselves in subarctic temperatures as it gets colder and colder? So I think the challenge, Joe, is leadership. And it doesn't matter who leads. I don't think that's the important thing. The important thing is that whoever we decide is our leader or leaders or whomever it may be, is that they are all on the same page and believe in the same values and principles in terms of how are we going to embrace frameworks. And the ADM is a suitable framework. LTAD is a suitable framework that will enable a physically literate culture. I think that's what we all want. But we really need some people in a variety of organizations and initiatives to start to talk to each other and work together. So to me, the biggest challenge is one of leadership or a lack thereof.
Yeah, a couple questions left here. I'm going to try to wrap them together because, again, I think some things have already been discussed. Talked about what is LTAD, what are some advances, challenges. We need to talk about some solutions, don't we? Some solutions have already been mentioned, I think, in this conversation, but let's dig deep if we can here. And where do we really need to go to solve these issues and challenges? And again, not just talking about it, but guys, what really needs to happen?
How do we make youth sports successful and profitable and move forward? You know, we're in a free market society. You can't just say, all right, well, you're not going to make all the money in youth sports anymore. Let's just go play and have fun for the kids. It's not going to happen in the American culture. So how do you monetize that? How do you create that solution? When I was in Philly, I was part of a campaign where the Ed Snyder Youth Hockey Foundation invited our Philadelphia Lacrosse Association, and they got together and they cross-trained coaches. And then they let the athletes play the different sports. And at the end of the day, they found out they had twice as many coaches, twice as many officials, and twice as many participants. It can be done. But I think a lot of times sports programs get concerned that if they allow kids to try another sport or to go somewhere else, they'll never see them again. But if it's done correctly, it can absolutely be done. There was a conversation I was a part of a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about, well, video games would never do that. And actually they do. So they encourage kids to cross over and try different games and even different brands so that they could really enjoy the experience of playing video games. We're not doing that in our youth sports. We're trying to isolate kids into one little pocket rather than giving them the opportunities. And, we have an official shortage. It's a national catastrophe right now. So unless we figure out a way that we could get together to do that. So we really need to break down the silos, I think, is one of the keys there. That's tough, like Tony said, because there's no czar, there's no Ministry of Sport in the United States. There's no one group that's responsible to make that happen. USOPC is a governing body, but it doesn't have teeth. It can't enforce regulations and get people to do what really needs to happen. So I know there's been talk about having an organization that has that charge, but we as the citizens can certainly do that. We just need to continue fighting the good fight that we're doing. And then I think the three of us are in a unique position because we see the academic side that we started the conversation off with, and we also see the practical boots on the ground side because we're all part of that too. So we can see how the two sides connect, but a lot of other groups are either in one realm or the other. So we need to figure out how do we get them all together behind that shared vision. I really think the collective impact strategy is an effective tool that we could use to move where we need to go. We just need to share what that is and let people understand what we're talking about. So the more conversations we have, the more chances we have to talk like this, the more the people get out there, recognize that, you're not just listening to what we're talking about, you're the solution. We're all the solutions. So I think if we can get everybody else to recognize and understand that they need to join with us, find out what they can do in their community. I know Tony's doing a great project where he is. I'm working on a big project in Philadelphia. So doing a real boots on the ground initiative where we are to move forward is huge. So I think the more people that we could start to be like the generals in their area and in their community to really build this up. So all of a sudden it gets recognized. It starts with us. So while we're waiting for somebody to come down and say, hey, here's what we need to do, I think we do it. And we just start getting going. Say, here's what we're going to do. Here's our plan. Let's move.
We need more Paul Revere's, don't we?
We do. We do.
Yeah, it's definitely a top-down, bottom-up approach. You know, going back to what Rick said, you know, I try in my space to be a hands-on, boots on the ground, volunteer, youth sport coach, league administrator, because it's very difficult for me to speak about something if I don't understand how it's organized and how it's structured at that level. So who am I to talk about how a youth sport program should be run if I'm not getting my hands dirty and speaking to the parents and speaking to the volunteer coaches and speaking to the kids and asking them what would they like to do. So to me, that's very important. And so we need to approach this village by village in terms of getting the community and the stakeholders in that community. And I think they're willing, because I've worked in my own community. I've worked with parks and recreation. I've worked with youth sport leagues. I worked with parents to make it happen for kids a couple months ago. And it happened, but it took a group of people, a collective, to be able to do that. So it can happen. The other thing that has to happen is we have to take what we know from what we've achieved academically, the science, the research, the white papers, the position papers, and we need to make it digestible for youth sport coaches and parents and community recreation leaders and physical educators. That they are an extremely vitally important piece of this puzzle too. We need to do that. We need to make it so that they can understand what the heck it is we're talking about, because that's where we're losing people. And if we're creating a product that they can't understand or follow or implement, that position paper or that white paper or whatever it might be it's worthless. You might as well start a fire with it. It's absolutely worthless because nobody can understand it. So those doctrines, those pieces of paper, whatever they might be, we need to do a better job at the top end to make it so they can interpret it and use it.
Yeah, Tony, I totally agree with you. But as we all know, a lot of these national sporting bodies, US lacrosse, USA hockey, the list goes on and on, almost all of the governing bodies now, they understand this as well, right? That they need to translate and then disseminate, do coach education, parent education. They have a good working model. But again, as I go out and speak to coaching groups, and both of you do, like, I like to ask, the question, depending on what group I'm in front of. I was in front of, baseball coaches recently. Hey, are you familiar with USA Baseball's long-term athletic development model? No, haven't heard of it. So those materials can be there, they can be translated and stuff. But again, going back to challenges, barriers, right? We have this barrier where things can be created at the top. They're not getting filtered down to the grassroots level, right? So we need to find a solution there, whether that be, marketing aspects of it. And I still go back to public health. So again, one of my colleagues here at the University of Nebraska Kearney, and we've been colleagues for 20 plus years. He's in public health, and they're trying to solve a variety of public health issues. This is a public health issue in some regards, right? So tapping into their minds and using some of their approaches related to dissemination and more specifically implementation, right? They have these working models as well. Like, how do you go into a community and, do an assessment and get buy-in and begin to infiltrate and implement this program, this product as well? I think we need to start tapping into them a little bit, along with, some some marketing aspects of it as well to keep raising awareness at the grassroots level, because we talk about it all the time, and people who follow me on social media are probably sick of it. But again, enough with these position papers and enough with revising the physical activity guidelines. Like, we know we're supposed to be moving. We know what best practices are in youth sport coaching, in physical education, or whatever domain it is, right? But why isn't it happening? Right? Like that's a human behavior change thing at the individual level, at the neighborhood level, at the community level. And so being able to tap into some of these other resources, like I said, public health and perhaps marketing, so that we can get help doing what the three of us can do fairly well, right? Go into a community and show them some things as well, or even better, like digitally give them that information. And again, going back to what I started with, the national governing bodies, they have apps, right? Like, here's the practice plan, but people don't know about it, or people don't use it. So how can we change that as well?
Yeah, some orgs are better than others. I know that
Yeah.
across USA Hockey, they've got fairly good models. I'm working on a project right now with USA Ultimate. So some orgs, as Rick said, hate to say they don't have teeth, but yeah, they just don't bite very hard, the USOPC, in terms of giving people the resources. We are resource strapped. That's that marketing piece, right? I mean, unless you have the ability to promote your product, nobody's going to hear about it, and that is a barrier. That's on us. If we want change, that's on us and everybody that's going to be listening to this chat. That's on us to make that connection. And that's the only way it's going to be done, because we are resource strapped, and it's only going to get worse because the tax base is getting hammered right now. So communities are not going to have the resources in many cases to promote their programs. So it's going to take quite a bit of a volunteer effort. And so it's on us as individuals to let people know that these materials exist. And we need to get outside of our Twitter base or our Instagram base or our Facebook base. We need to get outside of that silo. That's a social media silo that we all exist within, and we need to get out of it. We need to find a way of making it spread like a virus, right?
It's an interesting point, Tony, because I think that same social media circle are our Paul Revere's. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the Paul Revere's just kind of sit and look at it and go, that's nice. And, that's a clever post. I like that. Rather than saying, how can I actually use this in my youth sports group, in my community? And I keep thinking that we've provided a lot of the why and the what. But from most people's perspective, we haven't really shared with them very well the operationalization or the how. How do I do this specifically? Because they don't really know what to do and how to do it. So we're giving them all the tools they need. We can hand out the shovels all day, but until we teach them how to put their foot down on it and how to dig a hole, it's really not taking effect. It's not helping. So there's that one piece I think that we still work on, and not to plug the LTAD playgrounds, but that's what we do when we go out into these communities, and it's been very successful, is to show them how. So we get the right people at the table who need to be part of that community to recognize and understand what needs to be done. All right, here's a brief overview of, the what and the why. So here's the how, here's how to do that. Here's the action, here's what you can do. Share some best practices of what's already going on in your community, and then add that accountability piece. Say, all right, you're going to do it, but now where are you going to be 1 year from now? Let's start setting some goals. Let's see what you can actually do with this now that you know the what, why, and the how. So how do you put all that together? Yeah. I really think that we need to get more actionability. Look at the high school the LTAD Facebook page, the NSCA Facebook page. Over 7,000 people are members of that page. Probably 25 are active on a regular basis. We put together programs, initiatives, and things, and you don't get all that many showing up. That is 7,000 Paul Revere's to get out there. And if we could really just figure out a way to push that button to get those people to move, to act, to join with us to make this happen, it would be huge, because I don't know how many countries are represented. I would venture to guess that all 50 states minimally. and at least 15 countries are represented in that particular Facebook group. Joe, your followers on Twitter, unbelievable. If you could get every one of those 10,000 plus followers to say, you know what, Joe, what do? I'm going to be a Paul Revere. Let's get this going. We have the people in place to do this. We need I don't know, maybe it's like the French Revolution. we need everybody to step up and say, we're going to make this happen in 2021. Enough is enough, but we haven't reached that frustration point yet for a lot of people because they just want to put that comfortable shoe back on.
Yeah, certainly, Rick. Well, again, good dialogue, on this episode. We're not going to stop. We're going to keep doing the LTAD chats, and we're going to keep doing the other things that we do. We're definitely very thankful for everybody who listens and follows along and, is trying to be a Paul Revere in your school or community or club. And I know sometimes there can be frustration with that as well, because it's just you and you're trying to convince other coaches or administrators within your school, club, or community, and they're not buying in. Remember, Rome's not built in a day. And sometimes you just have to win with the winners, and those who are interested, just keep winning with them, and keep, as we say, fighting the good fight as well. Don't give up, because we know if you give up, it's going to go back to what it was before you started pushing along with us as well. So yeah, guys, thanks again for your time and sharing the insights on these questions. Going back to the start, like, what is it? What is long-term athletic development, which we know is going to keep circulating as well. Some people are new to it and they want to know, yeah, I've been reading about it, but I'm not really sure what is it. Is it a framework? Is it a model? Is there a curriculum for it? What is it? And then, once you start to understand what it is and what resources are available for you, knowing what's going on in the space and the challenges that you're going to see, and then, you guys offering some potential solutions at the national level and at the local level as well. So, we'll keep updating people as we go along. So again, thanks for your time tonight. If you guys have any final thoughts, you're welcome to hear them as well as we sign off.
Well, Joe,
Thanks, Joe, and let's just keep fighting the good fight. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I just want to say I appreciate the opportunity that the three of us get to continue this conversation, because the power of the three amigos is big. And I think the more people that we get on board, and you mentioned it, if anybody wants to reach out to us, I think they certainly should. We're more than accessible and happy to help and to provide any direction we can within communities individually to try to move this program forward. And I think that's another piece that's been missing, is like, who do I turn to if I need some information?
Yeah, but it's also us learning from them as well.
Right. Yeah.
We obviously do not have all the answers, and we are not going to solve the problem by just the three of us. So being able to listen to them and listen to what they think might be possible solutions as well. I'm sure they're going to be listening to this and they might be, oh, they're missing a big opportunity. And here's what it is. Yeah, please reach out and share that information so that we can either get you on the LTAD chat and discuss it, and carry that message forward if it's a viable solution, or if you have any other insights. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
All right, guys, thanks again.
Thanks, Joe.
Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, Rick.
Yep. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, cheers, guys.